we had the opportunity to flip it, to do something different than we've ever done before.
Take a look at this clip here.
It makes me want to go work out right now.
This is one that truly sets it off.
So what do you think?
I like it.
When D-Wade first came into the league, he signed with Converse, a brand that was still trying to hang on in the basketball world. And for a minute, it looked like he might keep them afloat. His first few shoes were actually a hit. The Wade 1 had that shark-inspired design, clean Miami colorways, and real on-court appeal. Converse put real weight behind it. They gave him 4 more signature models, hoping to make him the centerpiece of their comeback. But by the time they dropped the Wade 4, things were falling apart. The design didn't land and he hated the way they felt. He left Converse on his own in 2009 and signed with Jordan. For the next few years, it looked like that would be his final stop. He was the face of a legacy line that most players could only dream about. He wore flagship Jordans on court, there was a clear path forward, but in 2012, he left again. This time for Li-Ning, not just for a deal, but to build something. The contract came with its own identity, Way of Wade. That changed the conversation. It was the first time a star player walked away from one of the big 3 and came back with his own name on the box. He helped shape the designs and he was actively recruiting other players. He treated it like something that was his and not just something he wore on court. D-Wade wasn't just endorsing a sneaker, he was building a lane. And after that move, Chinese brands weren't just seen as fallback options anymore. At the time, his move to Li-Ning felt so risky. Leaving Jordan for a Chinese sneaker company? No one was doing that. At least not while they were still a top player. But that's what made it stick. He didn't just test the waters, he went all in. And in 2018, he doubled down and signed a lifetime deal. Other players started to take notice. D-Wade had everything he wanted. He had creative control, his own brand, and most importantly, he wasn't treated like a second-tier athlete. After that, Li-Ning was seen as a real player in the sneaker space, not just in China, but around the league. What D-Wade started gave guys like Nikola Jokic permission to do the same thing. Most people didn't even realize it, but Jokic signed with 361, a Chinese sportswear brand. Not as big as Anta or Li-Ning, especially outside of China, but still a real player in the space. For Jokic, the appeal was clear. His deal came with a signature line, something Nike never gave him even after multiple MVPs and a championship. The deal came and went without much attention, partly because it leaked early and partly because that's just how Jokic moves. But if you were paying attention, it felt like a big deal. He had just won a title, was at the height of his game, and still chose to walk away from Nike. Not to go independent, but to sign with a Chinese brand almost nobody in the US had ever worn. This wasn't a late career cash out. Jokic doesn't move like that. He saw something in 361 and they saw something in him, a way to prove they could land a franchise player. That kind of signing changes how a brand is viewed overnight, not just by fans but by other players too. Wade opened the door, Jokic reminded everyone this thing's legit, but that was 11 years apart. So what happened in between? They didn't slow down, they just kept building. In 2014, Klay Thompson signed with Anta, which was still at the time when almost no NBA stars were going that route. He wasn't settling, the deal turned into one of the most valuable in the league. By 2017, he signed a 10-year extension worth up to $80 million, keeping him with Anta through 2026. That put him among the top 10 highest paid sneaker endorsers in the NBA. Anta gave him his own signature line, the KT series, and turned him into a global face for their brand. The shoes took off in China and slowly started to gain traction in the US. And that's really what changed. These brands weren't just handing out checks, they were building around guys, and those guys were delivering. Jimmy Butler moved to Li-Ning after leaving Jordan Brand. He never got a signature shoe there, but Li-Ning didn't wait. They gave him the JB1 right away. Even guys outside the spotlight got deals. Andrew Wiggins and Lou Williams both signed with Peak. Rondo wore Antas for years. These weren't one-off endorsements, a lot of these players had full lines and real input on design. None of this happened overnight. These brands weren't chasing hype, they were quietly offering something different. More money, more creative control, and an actual seat at the table. By the time Jokic made his move, it wasn't a surprise. It was the next step in a trend that had already been building for years. This wasn't just about athletes chasing money, the brands were changing too. Li-Ning and Anta didn't just hand out contracts, they reinvested, built design teams, opened flagship stores, hired US reps, and started making products that could actually compete. By 2022, Anta had overtaken Nike in China. They became the second biggest sportswear company in the country, only trailing Li-Ning. And globally, they were creeping up too. Anta is now one of the 4 largest athletic brands in the world by market cap, right behind Nike, Adidas, and Puma. They got there by focusing on basketball, not just as a category, but as a culture. They gave stars full signature lines, creative freedom, and faster production cycles. They didn't just chase the US market, they built around Asia, where a lot of these players have huge followings. Meanwhile, American brands were raising prices and signature shoes were getting rarer, and most players were wearing general releases with no say in the process. So when a company like Anta or 361 shows up offering a real deal, real input, and your own shoe, that's not second tier anymore, that's a better offer. The biggest changes don't always start with marketing. Sometimes they start with a pickup game. For years, Chinese shoes were seen as jokes. Knockoffs, budget pairs, something you only wore if you couldn't afford Nikes. But that's not what people are saying anymore. TikTok or YouTube, and you'll see the same comments again and again. I tried a pair of Antas and now they're my go-to. Fans aren't just noticing the brands, they're starting to trust them, and that matters. It makes you the guy who knows. It's not just talk either. Sales are climbing, Anta's revenue has nearly doubled in the last 5 years. Li-Ning posted a 30% jump in basketball category growth year over year. And these aren't inflated numbers. They're built off local demand, not just overseas hype. Even players talk about it. Guys like Lou Williams and Evan Turner have said publicly that the Chinese shoes they wore were better than their American pairs, and that's coming from dudes who played in everything. At some point, the stigma just wore off. What used to be considered off-brand is now just another real option. And for players who never got a real shot with Nike or Adidas, it might be the best option. When Kyrie Irving left Nike, most people thought he'd either sign with another US brand or fade into sneaker limbo. But instead, he made the boldest move of all. He signed with Anta. And he didn't just sign as an athlete, he became their Chief Creative Officer. That title meant something. It gave him a real voice in design, branding, and product direction, not just for his own shoe, but the whole basketball category. Within months, his first Anta signature model was on shelves. Fast turnaround, full creative control, and a team that actually listened. After years of tension with Nike, from calling out his own shoes to feeling boxed in, Kyrie finally had the one thing he couldn't get before: freedom. It was the kind of power shift that would have been unthinkable 10 years earlier. Back then, Chinese brands were where guys went at the end. Now, it's where stars go when they want a bigger role. Kyrie's deal didn't just give him a shoe, it gave him the ability to build something that reflects him. That's bigger than money. That's identity. And just like D-Wade and Jokic, Kyrie proved that these moves aren't a fluke, they're the future. What started as a quiet movement is now a recruiting pipeline. It's not just veterans making the jump anymore. Younger players are paying attention, and brands are too. Li-Ning signed RJ Hampton before he was even drafted. Anta brought in players like Alex Caruso and Kevin Looney. Even high school prospects and overseas stars are locking into long-term deals before their names ever even hit NBA broadcasts. The goal isn't just to sell shoes, it's to grow with a player from the beginning. Chinese brands are thinking long-term, and more importantly, they're giving guys what American brands rarely do anymore: a full platform. Signature lines with real design input, marketing built around them specifically, not just the logo. For players outside that elite swoosh tier, it's becoming the better offer. Not the fallback, the smart play. And with Kyrie setting the blueprint for creative control and Jokic proving that even MVPs will walk away from Nike, the next wave doesn't feel like a stretch. It feels inevitable. So, what happens next? At some point, one of these brands is going to land a generational prospect, a rookie who picks Anta or Li-Ning first. And when that happens, the game really changes. Because this was never about shoes, it was about ownership. And the next generation sees that. There used to be a blueprint: make the league, play well, and hope Nike calls. Now, that ladder's broken. D-Wade gave players a new option. Jokic showed them even the best could walk away. Kyrie turned it into something bigger, something you could build, not just wear. These aren't one-off deals. These are guys betting on themselves and betting on something that actually sees them. Chinese sneaker brands aren't trying to be Nike. They're trying to be something else, something more collaborative, more global, and more player-driven. And little by little, it's working. This isn't a trend, it's not a gimmick, it's the future. And it's already here.